Do you know what Elon Musk's most valuable business is? If you said Tesla, you're actually wrong. SpaceX is planning to go public in June with the largest IPO valuation of any company in history at about $1.75 to $2 trillion. To put that into perspective, that would immediately make SpaceX the 7th most valuable company on Earth, bigger than Meta. And before you think, oh, this has nothing to do with me, don't be so sure. Markets are literally changing the rules to force you to become a SpaceX shareholder. Oh, and after you own SpaceX, you'll also be part owner of companies losing more than $1 billion a month. So let me break it down for you. So for those who don't know, what does SpaceX do? Well, it's what its name sounds like. Zero gravity pornography. No, I'm kidding, obviously. Elon Musk founded SpaceX in 2002 with the goal of stranding humans on Mars. And not just people he didn't like. The plan was to establish a Martian colony to ensure mankind's survival after we went extinct on Earth. And if it seems more challenging to colonize a planet with an atmosphere that suffocates you immediately than solve problems on Earth, well, I don't know, have you used Reddit in the past decade? I understand giving up. No, I mean, that's classic Elon Musk, right? Why pursue a straightforward solution when there's a complicated, capital-intensive, technologically nightmarish alternative with a cool narrative? Now, in 2008, SpaceX almost went bankrupt after 3 failed rocket launches, but Elon was spared from selling free friendship bracelets in Barcelona after getting a contract from NASA to make flights to the International Space Station. I mean, 4 failed rocket launches would just be excessive, right? Actually, yes. Believe it or not, SpaceX is basically the company that gets us into space today. Over 80% of our launches are from SpaceX. Its Falcon 9 rocket is cheap and reliable, and it sounds like an F-Zero machine. SpaceX has reusable boosters. SpaceX flights cost a fraction of what space missions used to. It's a marvel of engineering. And its competition is, well, I mean, think about it this way. In 2014, NASA paid Boeing $4.2 billion and SpaceX $2.6 billion to get astronauts to the ISS. SpaceX delivered, but Boeing missed deadlines and launched its Starliner flight test with NASA astronauts Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore in 2024, 4 years after SpaceX had been successfully ferrying astronauts to the ISS. Then the 2 astronauts who were supposed to be in space for about a week were stranded for 9 months because they couldn't get back safely in Boeing's rocket and had to be rescued by, can you guess, Jeff Bezos and Katy Perry. No, SpaceX. In addition to rockets, SpaceX has Starlink, which is a satellite-based high-speed internet service with about 10 million subscribers and around $10 to $16 billion in revenue. And finally, on the possibly stupider side of things, SpaceX has been talking about putting data centers in space because, I mean, can you imagine the catastrophic collapse of our education system if students had to read and write without Claude? Admittedly, I have no idea how feasible powering AI from space is, but my cursory research suggests it could be significantly more difficult and expensive to do than on Earth, but Elon Musk says it's the future of AI. Anyway, even the biggest Elon hater has to acknowledge that SpaceX is an incredible business with many moats that protect it from competitors. So why am I about to spend the rest of this video telling you to be very careful? Because we're switching topics to the apex predator of the Amazon, the black caiman. No, you remember Twitter, right? The social media platform we once used to refine racist insults. Oh, we still do? Well, in the 4 years since Elon Musk bought it in 2022 for $44 billion, saddled it with $13 billion in debt, and renamed it to X, it's been losing users and revenue. Between inappropriate images and moderation, advertisers have been fleeing, and dozens of users have migrated to open source competitor Blue Sky. Grok, is this true? The year after Elon purchased Twitter, he founded XAI, the company behind Grok, which revolutionized asking your AI anime girlfriend whether retweeting radical propaganda would get you canceled. But the Grok journey wasn't silky smooth. It called itself Mecha Hitler. Elon got super into this avatar. Not that he doesn't have great taste, but and compared to heavyweight competitors like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude, Grok is not as popular. Like most AI-related companies, XAI burns cash like, Australian UV on a Swede? Not my best. Anyway, XAI loses about $1 billion a month. So when XAI acquired X in 2025, 2 money-losing companies became one. So if you think about it algebraically, that actually makes it a profitable company. Then in February 2026, SpaceX acquired xAI in the largest merger ever, other than you hugging your mom, in a deal that valued the combined company at about $1.25 trillion. So SpaceX now earns a money-burning AI company, mostly for Twitter users to avoid critical thinking, which is kind of like an anglerfish avoiding the Sahara. No great need for that service. In addition to an unprofitable social media company whose posts we still call tweets. I mean, Elon said in March that xAI was not built right the first time, so it's being rebuilt. So to summarize, when you buy SpaceX stock, you're also buying Twitter's debt, Grok's cash burn, and an AI company being rebuilt from scratch, all for the low, low price of $2 trillion. Some people think he'll throw in Tesla in the future, which is practically a meme stock now, to complete the Muskopoly. Okay, but why IPO now? First of all, well, I don't really know how old my audience is, but you're vaguely familiar with the 2008 financial crisis. Basically, banks wrote a bunch of bad loans, then new regulations were put in place to prevent them from lending $2 million to companies like Big Stinky Poopy LLC anymore. But Big Stinky Poopy LLC still had feces to sell, and it needed money to buy a downtown office. In comes private credit. You, me, and some of our friends pool our money to lend to Big Stinky Poopy, and we make it a little more expensive because we're literally investing in a poop-selling business, so it's risky, but that works for both parties. That's a simplification, but it captures the basic idea of private credit. Now you're up to speed because that system has exploded since the 2008 financial crisis and is worth trillions of dollars. Maybe you've heard about Blue Owl in the news recently. However, oopsie, that well of funding is drying up. That's one reason for this IPO. SpaceX has been doing private funding rounds its entire life and now wants to raise about $75 billion. That's a lot of money. It's difficult for private markets to swallow. And the private investors who have been with Elon since 2002 want something now as well, but we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, here's another good reason for this timing. Imagine your friend is having a birthday party. Well, imagine you have friends, then imagine you have friends who would invite you to their birthday party. If you and two mutuals all buy the birthday girl an Apple Watch, would you want to give it to her first, second, or third? First, right? By the time she opens the third Apple Watch, her excitement about being able to decline calls 3 seconds faster will be at its lowest. This year may be the most crowded IPO year in history. SpaceX's IPO alone could be bigger than all IPOs from the last 2 years combined, and OpenAI, maker of ChatGPT, and Anthropic, maker of Claude, are both planning to go public in 2026 as well. SpaceX has a strategic incentive to be first because investors have a finite amount of money they're willing to put into AI-adjacent companies, and the first one out may get a disproportionate share of that money. But there is something weird happening with SpaceX's IPO specifically. SpaceX's CFO has said that retail investors, like you and me, are going to be a bigger part of this deal than any IPO in history. But why? Why would they need retail investors if institutions, the big guys like hedge funds, should be lining up to take this extraordinary deal? Well, Elon said it's to be generous, so it's obviously not that. Historically, retail investors get about a 5 to 10% allocation of an IPO, but SpaceX is looking at 30%. Here are some possible reasons. The deal could be simply too large for institutions alone, so they need retail money to participate at scale. And like we hinted at earlier, institutional investors who have been invested in SpaceX for over 20 years need someone to sell to. I mean, think about it. Even in 2020, SpaceX was valued at about $46 billion. The people who've been involved since 2002 have made a tremendous amount of money. On paper, the price of their shares has gone up, but that only matters if they're able to sell them. You and I provide that liquidity when these long-term investors sell after the IPO. And Elon is like the GOAT of making markets ignore fundamentals. I mean, look at Tesla. Its valuation is not based on current business. It's based on stories. It's based on self-driving and robots and not declining car sales. By being Elon, basically, Elon can get a ton of money in through retail, and those people often turn into brand evangelists. Because ultimately, despite SpaceX's legitimacy as a business, a $2 trillion valuation is crazy. The stock price is going to fall after it IPOs, and retail investors will almost certainly pay the peak price. Mega IPOs often do this. Meta fell after its IPO, Uber fell. If you remember Rivian, that fell like 80%. SpaceX may eventually be worth $2 trillion, but it won't be in June, I can tell you that. Okay, but remember how I said you won't have a choice? Index funds that track major indices like the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ buy shares of the companies in those indices. I know, rocket science. Now, normally some rules preclude companies that have just IPO'd from joining these indices, but there are discussions and regulatory proposals about changing the rules that would allow SpaceX to join much faster. If SpaceX joins the S&P 500 or NASDAQ at a $2 trillion valuation, your index fund automatically buys it at whatever price it's trading at the time of inclusion. So if you own an ETF like VOO, you may get exposure to a $2 trillion valuation whether you want it or not. Did you know that this deal could make Elon the first trillionaire? I don't know if that changes anything. Maybe he would finally get invited to Epstein Island. I mean, one man with capital comparable to some countries, but without, like, pesky accountability mechanisms like constitutions and courts and elections is kind of nuts, right? Arguably already, Elon has demonstrated unreasonable influence for one person, like unilaterally blocking Starlink access during the Ukraine war, which he described as preventing escalation in Ukraine, called sabotage, spending like $300 million in the 2024 US election. I mean, I think Trump would have won anyway, but, you know, that's a thing. Potentially unlawfully using Doge to benefit himself and his companies. And with that kind of wealth, if anything ever goes wrong, that person just simply leaves the country for somewhere without an extradition treaty, or more likely just lobbies the government to not get in serious trouble to begin with. So I don't expect there to ever be repercussions for anything, really. Whether or not the SpaceX IPO pushes him over the trillionaire threshold doesn't really even matter. None of that is a reason not to invest. It's just kind of crazy to think about. Anyway, if parts of this video about the stock market were confusing, I highly recommend you check out this video next so you can easily follow what people are talking about when they discuss the stock market. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.